speaker actually is Dr. Ann Larson, and she will be coming up present. Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming. Enjoy the day, guys.
Good morning. You're not wrong, so. My name's Sandy.
My name's Ann.
My name's Olin. And we are not doctors. We are not nurses. We are not healthcare administrators. We are not policy experts. We're not from the insurance industry, and we certainly never intended to be healthcare activists. So we are just three everyday people who are now opening the Tedmed conference today. Just over a year ago, we met while occupying Wall Street. We were united in our anger against growing inequality, our disappointment with our corrupt and failing institutions, and tired of living in a society where the majority are exploited for the benefit of a few. In the midst of what looked like chaos, we began sharing our stories, and we realized our collective power. And then we were evicted, so we just moved to another part. And the conversations became more focused. We realized the intersection between us and Wall Street was our debt. The very debts we incur just to meet our basic needs, health, housing, and food, were the bread and butter of Wall Street. So we self-organized. Without government, without experts, we joined the global anti-austerity movement, and we called ourselves Strike Debt.
Hi. So we're honored to be here with so many dedicated healthcare practitioners and experts. We don't claim to know what you face every day in your clinics and hospitals, but we are here because we have learned something about what happens to patients after they leave your office. And we're here to challenge you to organize with your colleagues and your patients to end medical debt and to work together to create a healthcare system that benefits everyone. First, let me tell you a little more about Strike Debt's Rolling Jubilee initiative. The first thing to know is that debt is bought and sold for pennies on the dollar on a shady secondary market full of debt buyers and collectors. So if you have consumer debt and you go into default, for example, the lender can sell your debt for a fraction of its original value, giving themselves a sweet tax write-off. And then debt collectors try to collect the full amount from you, the debtor. Strike Debt's Rolling Jubilee Fund purchases this debt, but instead of collecting on it, we just abolish it. When we first announced the Rolling Jubilee campaign back in November, we were flooded with thousands of emails from people in debt. Many were asking for help that we can't provide, since all debt is sold in anonymous bundles. But many others just wanted to share their stories. While it isn't surprising that we got so many letters, after all, 3/4 of Americans are in some kind of debt, we did not expect so many people to write to us about medical debt. We want to share some of those stories with you today.
Sickness can destroy you in America. Both my partner and I had full-time jobs when I got sick. Though we had insurance, we didn't have family leave. And when you're on chemotherapy 6 days a week, there's no way you can keep your job. Then, 2 years later, my partner got sick. Even though we had health care, the bad situation became a crisis. When our savings ran out, there was no safety net for us. Who has an emergency fund to last 9 months? What if you have to tap it twice? We began living on credit cards. I think people have a lot of assumptions about how people get into credit card debt. For us, it was how we survived during our most difficult days. Fact is, insurance doesn't cover everything, and you can't work if you're sick. Even people with health care are affected by medical costs. We'll be paying off our credit card debt into retirement. We can't save for our child's education or plan for the future. People who have insurance and a little money in the bank think nothing bad is going to happen to them. But what happened to us can happen to them too. It can happen to anyone.
Of New York. In 1996, while insured by United Healthcare, I had to undergo open heart surgery. Serious stuff. Your circulation is diverted to a machine, your ribs opened up, your body is cooled to about 70 degrees, and your heart is stopped and cut open. I was put under twice. The first attempt was botched. A tube had caused internal bleeding, making the operation impossible. The operation itself was successful, and then the billing problems began. United Healthcare refused to pay for the second anesthesia because by their rules, they only pay for one anesthesia for this type of operation. For more than 6 months, U.S. Healthcare continued refusing to pay, and Mount Sinai Hospital continued to bill me directly for more than $4,000. And then the in-network surgeon billed me directly for the half of his fee that United Healthcare wouldn't pay, which was another $2,500. I'm mighty bullheaded, so I wrote plenty of letters. United Healthcare finally did pay up, but what if I didn't know I could fight it, as so many people might not?
From Florida. I'm a 29-year-old teacher in a low-income area here in Florida. I know that this movement is a movement that aids people at random, but I felt compelled to email you today after a lesson with my students. We were learning about speaking up even when it's not popular, to speak truth and say what is right. As I worked and listened with my students, I tried to communicate what I was experiencing. My wife and I are both teachers, saddled with student loans, and my wife recently had testing done for an overactive thyroid. We have medical debt. She's also expecting our first child, and we are scared out of our minds. How can we afford the added expenses and pay off our debt? We fear we will not be able to give our little girl a stable and healthy life. We need help. We have turned to banks, but credit is tight and only leads to more debt. We can't turn to our parents. They're struggling just as we are. We're scared, we're lost, we don't know what to do.
We received many letters like these. We heard from debtors whose lives had been ruined by one grim diagnosis. We heard from people who had lost their homes, or who had to empty their retirement accounts to care for a sick family member. We realized that medical debt is debt we incur in many cases for the privilege of staying alive. We got so many letters about medical debt that we decided to focus our first major debt purchase on medical debt and to build a campaign around it. Recently, we purchased a $1.2 million portfolio of medical debt for about $21,000 and abolished the debt of over 1,000 people. We sent letters to every debtor letting them know that their debt had been abolished and they no longer have to pay it. We also started doing research on medical debt, uncovering some facts that many of you probably already know. 50 million Americans have no insurance, and 77 million have trouble paying medical bills. That number has grown exponentially in recent years. Today, an astonishing 62% of personal bankruptcies are linked to medical debt, and most of those people had private insurance at the time they got sick. So why do Americans have so much debt? Our economy is controlled by the wealthy and by an investor class that has gambled our resources and stolen our futures. All the things we need to survive, like education, housing, and healthcare, are being privatized to profit a few at the expense of the rest of us. What has this meant for healthcare? The U.S. spends more on care than any other wealthy country in the world. Our for-profit healthcare industry costs more than twice what countries that have publicly financed care spend. Despite the high cost, Americans are sicker and die younger than people in other nations. Moreover, medical debt illustrates how debt has a spiraling effect. Once people go into debt for basic needs like healthcare, other debts follow. People put medical bills on their credit cards, and those with medical debt are more likely to lose their homes to foreclosure. Why can't private insurance protect us? What we learned by talking to debtors and healthcare practitioners around the country is that our profit-based system has already failed. That's why the Affordable Care Act, which will expand this failed market, can't solve the problem. Dr. David Himmelstein, a physician for a national health program, one of our allies in the fight to end medical debt, has said that private insurance is like an umbrella that melts in the rain. It simply isn't there when you need it most. So what can we do? The Rolling Jubilee is not a solution. It's only intended to help a few and to highlight the problem. Where Rolling Jubilee falls short is where you come in. Wall Street has infiltrated the healthcare industry, and you're on the front lines. Healthcare is a basic need and a human right. Making sure everyone gets the care they need, regardless of their ability to pay, is quite simply a question of justice. How can questions of justice and human rights be addressed in your practice? That's up to you. But we don't believe there are any individual solutions. Instead, we must act collectively, because we're all debtors. Many of you no doubt have debt yourselves, maybe even for the education that helped you get into this room in the first place. Our experience watching social movements around the globe and building strike debt has taught us that there is power in collective action. Appealing to politicians, the same politicians who are funded by Wall Street, is not the answer. Many of your patients leave your hospitals and clinics unable to pay for the care they receive. And many of them feel ashamed because they believe it is their fault. We're here to challenge you to change the conversation you have with your patients and let them know that, in fact, the system has failed them. To create a healthcare system that benefits all of us, we need a new economy, one in which our debts are to each other, to our families, and to our communities, not Wall Street. That's why we believe that the only real solution to our national healthcare crisis is a bottom-up, grassroots movement to put people before profits. We hope you'll join us in the fight. The time is now. It's up to us. It's life or death. Thank you.